Now, many years ago, my grandpa told me a story, and it's something that I've never been able to forget. My grandpa worked as a forest worker for quite a while. He would basically have to survey the area every so often and just try and keep it in its tip-top condition. It was a really beautiful place that he worked in. Now, I'd always remember this story that he told me again and again over different years. It was impossible to forget. Now, unfortunately, my grandpa passed away not too long ago. Now, one thing that I absolutely didn't realize is that he had an entire written account of everything that he had told me in his own words. So now today, I'd like to share this story with you. Now, I'd like to give you some backstory about my grandpa first before I actually start. Now, he was someone who was a very good, hard-working, honest guy. You'd never have any issues with him. I mean, if you ever heard that he was in an argument or something, then you knew for absolute certain that the other guy was probably in the wrong. He's just that kind of person. I mean, virtually everybody knew him. He also had this fantastic ability to remain completely calm and not panic in different situations. There's a lot of different characteristics of which he had that I now possess myself, and that I'm grateful for being able to watch him have and to be able to then eventually implement myself. I mean, really, I don't think I was half the man that he was at my best, but I tried to be, but even half is enough. Now, my grandpa was also somebody that would absolutely never lie. He just didn't have it in him. I mean, in any situation, he just wouldn't lie about things. It's just not the kind of person that he was. He lived some life too. He was actually drafted into parts of different wars, and it must have been difficult for him. He never actually told us exactly what happened during the wars. I just knew that it had an impact on him. And now, this story actually occurred to him before the wars too, so that puts out any doubt that it was related to PTSD or something from them. I do feel sorry for him though. I've been lucky enough to live a life where I've never had to be drafted or have anything like that happen to me so far. So now let me begin. Now, growing up in the same area and remaining there virtually his whole life, my grandpa eventually come to inherit a family home, and it's one that he'd always been on, so he didn't really know much different from it. So I'll now take the story from him and tell you exactly what he had wrote down. The first time this happened was when I was quite young. I don't know exactly how old I was, but I remembered that all throughout our villages there were reports of something strange in the forest. Apparently, people would wake up and hear scratching or knocking on the windows, then go outside and not see anything. You know, something else weird was there was all kinds of lights in the sky not too long after this would happen. A lot of us thought it was the apostles or God coming down to make us all repent for our sins or something. A lot of people were highly religious, but I wasn't myself, so it didn't bother me too much. Now, I remember coming home from school one day, and I had a long walk to get back. I had to go through different parts of the forest, and I was doing so with my friend Neil at the time. Neil was a good friend. We went to our first school together, and then our second one. We were kind of troublemakers every so often. We actually got kicked out of the first one for fighting within the space of a month of each other. But I guess our paths were supposed to cross again, because what do you know, we ended up seeing each other again and our paths crossed. So we've always taken this walk back, and it was quite good just to have a talk about things. We would seemingly never run out of different things to speak to each other about, and that made it really good. I remembered that on this particular day, it was honestly exceptionally cold. I mean, far more cold than I'd realised it had been at any other time, and it didn't feel very nice. It just kind of sucked walking home. I mean, cars weren't really a thing as much back then, so that wasn't an option. My family didn't have much money, so obviously that was out of the question, but it meant more bonding time for me and my buddy. So we get to walking, and my buddy constantly looks behind himself. I start making fun of him and touching the other side of his shoulder, causing him to turn round and jump at times. He says, "Come on, knock it off." I say what's wrong, and he says, "I just feel like there's something here." I started laughing at him, saying, yeah, watch out, we're never going to be found again. He says, no, knock it off. And we keep walking. Now, as we're walking, we do notice something very strange. Up in the sky, there's some kind of spinning object. It looks like a silver pan or something, just floating there. And it's got some lights on it too. I don't know what kind of lights they are, but they kind of glow like it's from a bushfire or something. And there's different colours, which is weird. I've never seen a bushfire like this. It's orange and purple and green. Maybe it's some kind of chemical that we hadn't learnt about. We start to think maybe it's something from our government. We're just really confused and just stood there for a while. Now, after standing there for probably about 20 minutes, we decide to keep moving. The only reason for that though really is because of how cold we both feel now. We know that we have to keep on going, but that thing doesn't move. Weirdly, we see it starting to drop down slowly further and further into the tree line. Now the good thing is, on this part of the walk we're actually going downhill, so it's now going to be a lot easier for us to just get to wherever this thing is, and that's what we decide to do. It's kind of close to some water, but lands just off in the ridgeline. I start to get a little bit shaken up now and tell Neil that we shouldn't investigate, and he says, you know what, you're right. But we have to keep on heading in this direction anyway. It seems like the further downhill we go, the more confident that we both become that we're going to be able to actually be alright if we investigate whatever this is. So now, I continue on with my friend, and we're both getting more and more confident, until eventually, he says it, come on man, let's just go. I say, yeah, let's do it. And we start walking towards this thing. There was also a smell. It kind of smelled like lead or copper. I don't know what it is. Or maybe some coins, but there was definitely something in the air. I actually think that I've got a nosebleed and I go to touch my face, but my buddy says, yeah, I've got the same thing. Weirdly, I did actually pick up a nosebleed not too long after, and my friend did too, which is really weird. We can never tell exactly if it was because of our noses bleeding or what. We thought maybe it was a cold, but it was weird. It was like there was a smell of metal long before the actual blood come, which was really strange. But we keep on going anyway. We're probably walking blindly into danger, but we're just curious as to what this is. Now we walk for quite a long time, and we honestly don't ever seem to be getting any closer to this, and we're both getting frustrated. We've kind of walked a bit further than we're supposed to now, trying to find this thing, and it's starting to get a little bit more dark. It's cold, and while walking through the trees, now off of the path, I actually got all moss and stuff stuck on my hands, and I really hate that stuff. I spend a while trying to brush it off myself, but my friend stops me and says, hey look, I see it. I say, what'd you see? And he doesn't say anything. I'm kind of annoyed actually, because I really can't see a thing, but he says, no look. And there we can see it. Just for maybe 1 or 2 seconds, there's something in the sky, not too far from where we're standing, and then there's a bright flash and this thing is gone. We stood there completely confused and baffled as to what just happened. It was like the thing just disappeared, and we start to think that we've scared it off somehow. It's a really odd experience, and I eventually go back with my friend and we forget about it. Now fast forward a few years, not much has happened since then, and that thing was long gone out of my mind. I had to work straight away after school had finished anyway, so I guess that I kind of got preoccupied with other things. But I was going through the same woods again. Now like I said, my family didn't have too much money. All of my money basically had to support the family, not get other things, and I didn't have an issue walking. Now one day I was walking home from work, just like any other day, excited for supper that my mum would have made for me. Now as I'm walking, I hear a strange sound. I really don't know how that I can describe it, other than like maybe something smashing up, like if you had a big strong hammer and it was metal, almost like you're trying to forge something. Maybe like the workers in the mill were used to, I don't know. And then, boom, an explosion. Now the shockwave made me jump, And then there's some kind of strange sound afterwards. It sounds like an animal, but not like one that I've ever heard of before. And I was curious, as I can see something smouldering not too far away. It was weird, and I really don't know what it was. So I start walking up now, trying to get to the exact source of whatever this is that's just crashed. For a second I think I see something and panic, but then I remember that I'm alone out here, and I haven't seen anyone, so I start to settle down a bit. There was something that was kind of drawing me to this thing. Kind of like the same feeling I had before that time with my buddy. Just like there's something interesting out there and I've kind of got to go and figure out what it is. I don't know what it was exactly and I don't know how to describe it, but I just had to go out there. Now this time it was raining a lot and I couldn't move so quick. There was leaves and stuff all over the floor. I don't have anything to keep the rain off myself, but I wasn't too bothered. All of the trees are quite tall here, so it's really helping keep the water off me. So I just continue on. Now this part of the forest honestly closely resembled a jungle more than it did the area that I lived in. There was just so many trees and things everywhere that it made it hard to see up ahead. Now I'm walking and I realise that a tree really looks like the silhouette of somebody. It kind of resembled that of some kind of ape or something. I don't know. But I start walking further and I realise that it's just in my head. I think, gosh, there's definitely something up here. I just don't know exactly what it could be. As I get closer, it kind of looks like a knight almost, with some kind of cloak on or something. But it was just a tree. That's how thick and dense a forest is up here. I really can't see much of anything. Now I'm walking up and down these hills in kind of like big zigzag, weird patterns. It's the only way that you could go up it like you're a billy goat or something, so I keep doing so. This means that it's going to take a while before I find out what this is. I did think it was odd how that it was raining and it still seemed to be on fire potentially, and then I see it. It's kind of like a blue-purple hue, similar to what I've seen before, but I just can't place my finger on it. Why does this feel so familiar when I've clearly never seen this before? And then I realised that this is just like the colours of that thing I'd seen in the sky. The big pan with my friend before. I think no, it can't be. Surely this isn't the same thing that I saw all those years ago. But it seems to be. So I keep on going. This time I want to figure out what it is. I was a bit bigger now, so I felt like I didn't have so much to be scared of like I did when I was a bit younger. I mean, why not just figure this thing out? Why not just be the guy that managed to do something? So that's what I do. I keep on heading up there. It was weirdly quiet though. I've never heard the place so still. It was almost like, you know when one of the big predators comes and everything else stops? Yeah, it was just like that. I only had that experience a few other times while hunting out with me old man. But it's something I hadn't had for a long while, so it definitely felt odd. Now I get closer, and I can hear something. It almost sounded like somebody rang a bell and put it right next to my head just to annoy me. Now it seems like the further I walk, the more it goes on. It was quite high in its tone, and I wondered whether there was actually something here if I just knocked my head or something. You know, like if you get hit really hard, you can have like a ringing in your ears. Like the bell sound. Well, it's kind of similar to that, but just different. Now it doesn't stop, but eventually it's something that I become completely used to. It sounds like it's pressurized now, and I wonder what it is. I wonder if this thing, whatever it is that's exploded, is actually leaking some kind of gas in the air, and I wonder if it's going to explode like dynamite. Well, I better find out. And then I can see something odd. Further down up ahead of me, there's something glowing but moving. Whatever this thing is, it's a very bright green colour. It almost hurt my eyes to look at, which is really strange, and it looks like the fire's moving. Now this gone on for a little while, and it doesn't move much, until suddenly, it seems to be getting a little bit bigger and bigger. It's so bright that I can actually see it behind the trees now. Now that's when I can finally get a better look once my eyes have adjusted to how bright this thing is. It's not as bright as the sun, but it's probably double or triple a normal moonlight, so it's quite powerful. Then, I can make out more of it. It kind of looks like it's almost bulb-shaped. The core is white and the outside is green. I'm really confused by what this is, and it then gets gradually closer and closer ever so slowly. I then realise that this thing is a little bit tall, taller than I am for sure. And it seems to be kind of crawling forwards. I can't see arms or anything, but it's definitely got a very pale coloured face and it almost looks like it's smiling. It was really scary. That's when I stopped for even longer, trying to figure out if this is on its own or not. I don't see much else, so I try not to panic and just sit there waiting. After about 5 or so minutes have now passed, I now realise that this thing, whatever it is coming towards me, and it's high time that I turn around and get out of there. It looked crazy. It looked like it was out of a comic or something, the way that it was moving towards me. I could just see this burning stuff and some embers behind it, but it doesn't seem phased at all. And the sound, it hasn't stopped. So now, I decide that I've seen enough and I start heading back in the direction that I've come from. I wasn't too bothered though. The only thing that's really bothering me is the fact that I've got shorts on. I don't know what that thing is. I don't think anybody's ever seen anything like it. Maybe it was the enemy had got here and invaded us or something and they just put their weapon on us. I don't know. I was ready to join the military if it was needed, but that come later. So I just casually make my way back and I still can't get the ringing out my ears. I ended up hitting my head a few times trying to see if I could dislodge it. I thought maybe it was water or something from a creek, I wasn't sure. But it doesn't really subside. It just seems to get gradually more and more quiet the further that I walk towards where I need to be. And I think, well, that would teach me for exploring when I shouldn't have. So eventually I get back home. Everything's normal for a couple of days and I hear a few of the guys at work talking about it. They're like, hey, do you see that thing in the sky? Yeah, it was crazy. Don't know what it is. It's like one of those big helium balloon things. You know the things in the sky that are silver? But he says, no, this thing was different. I don't know what this was. I then say, guys, what are you talking about? And they say, didn't you hear about it? Everybody saw that thing in the sky that night. And it just kind of crashed, bang, hit the ground real hard. Now, I open my mouth to speak, and I decide to not speak in the last second. I thought, you know what, I don't want to be the town idiot. I've just got this job, and I could lose it over something like this. So I say, that's really weird. The more I'm hearing them talk about it, the more I realise that whatever I saw was probably that. I was probably the closest that anybody ever got to whatever this thing is, and I don't know what it is. I didn't really want to tell my mum or dad too, or even my brother, because they're all quite religious and I know that they're going to take me to the church and I already have to do that enough and I don't like it. To them it's probably some kind of monster or demon from the gates of hell coming to get me for not living a good life. But I don't know, I just can't be bothered with it. So I decide that, well, that was that. And I forgot about it. See, a lot was happening in my life, so I seemed to be forgetting about things quite quickly. But, as always, there was more to come. And this is where it gets a bit more weird. Now, not too much longer after that happened, my brother keeps on getting this recurring nightmare. He wasn't that young too, but he would wake up literally screaming in the night. It was really scary. I mean, we'd all rush in and say, what's wrong? And he'd say, look, there was something in the window. There was something in the window. We asked him to describe it and he said, well, it was all white, but kind of glowing green at the edges. He said it looked like a skeleton from the cemetery, but he couldn't be too sure because he was so scared. Now this happened a few times. I asked him, where did the head come up on your window? And he said, well, it come up pretty high. It would have made that thing about 8 feet tall. I thought, wow, this is actually really weird. I said to him, do you not think it's anybody holding up a lantern? He said, no, of course not, and hit me. We actually started almost a fight then, And then eventually my mum and dad broke it up, saying, come on, stop. He says, you know what, if you're so brave, then why don't you live there? Why don't you stay in my room and I'll stay in yours? I said, fine. I'm no coward like my brother is. I'm not going to play possum if I see something there. I'm ready to fight it. I've got a rifle too, so I can go take that thing down. Also, I've got myself a flashlight now. Yeah, what's that thing going to do? So I start to relax a bit more. So there I am, really confident, heading into my brother's room, not worried about a thing. Now this actually went on for a while because we ended up forgetting to go back to our subsequential rooms and just stayed there. I kind of made it my home. I mean, all my possessions were in the living room basically, so it didn't matter. And I just basically started bullying my brother about how much of a coward he was and how that he weren't half the man I was. So, taking up my offer, or should I say insult, he decides that he's going to go out there and look for it. He does this alone for a while, but eventually I decide to join him. I then decide to tell him about the things that I've seen before because he said to me, you know what, have you ever had anything weird happen? I say, well, yeah, a few things. As we're patrolling the perimeter of our property, we had to defend it too because this could have been anyone. So while doing so, I explain my story and he looks at me odd. He says, you know what, that thing you talk about kind of sounds like the thing that I had seen. I'm pretty doubtful that I've seen that. It's probably nothing, man. You're probably just tired. But he says, no, it was weird. Well, anyway, we head back in without finding much of anything and I drift off to sleep. So then I wake up to some kind of tapping sound. Don't know what it is, but it jolts me up as I suddenly realise my duty on what I'm doing. I quickly get up and grab the light. I don't turn it on as I look around trying to see where did it come from. I can't see much of anything until then. I lock eyes or faces with something. It's that glowing thingy again. That demon, it's there. I say, God, what's that? I say, hey, and I turn on the flashlight and for some reason, the second the beam hit this thing's face, it kind of starts to run off. I could actually see where it was going because for a little while afterwards, in each step, there was some kind of glowing stuff which was green on the floor. I say, come on. I go to rouse up my brother, but he's too tired for this. And he's trying to get up quickly, but I say, come on, follow me. As I grab my rifle and some tape and my light, and I quickly tape this onto the rifle so I can see what I'm doing and shoot. I think I'm going to get me this kill. I've had enough of this, and I've decided that I'm going to go for it and start hunting it. Wow, this thing moved fast. Boy, I don't even know if I can keep up with it. I quickly follow where I can see the glowing embery things on the floor. It's more like goo the closer I get to it. It probably lasts for about a minute, but it's just enough to leave a trail to figure out where I'm going. The weirdest thing ever is that maybe it caught on fire, or I don't know. Every time that my torch actually goes over to this thing, or where it was, it kind of glows, which is really weird. I don't know if it's starting to set alight or what it is. They're not candles and they're not torches themselves, so I don't know what it is. But I can't figure out where this thing is. I ended up realising that my brother's come behind me and I almost shot him. It'd probably have been a good thing some days, but I scream at him. I was like, why didn't you tell me you're coming? He says, relax, just go. And we constantly follow this thing. My brother's got himself a pan, I don't know why. He's ready to whack that thing over the head, and so am I. And we start chasing even more. That's when we turn around a corner and we can see it. That thing's just sitting there. It's crouched down like it's injured. I scream out to it, who are you? What are you doing on our land? And I let off a shot close to its head. That's when that thing stood up. With every inch it grew in height, I start to tremble a bit more. That thing was massive. It was almost as big as one of the little trees we have on our yard. It was about 8.5 feet tall. It turned around, still glowing not very much, and that's when I hear a whistle sound. Well, I was so scared that I actually dropped the rifle and start sprinting with my brother in complete syncrasy. And and we start running back the way that we come, with our actual path still guided by the glowing embers of whatever that thing left on the ground. I can hear it, my brother screams as we realise that this thing has started chasing us. My brother starts tearing up. I say, come on, snap out of it, and I start screaming for my dad. We eventually get back into the house and slam the door behind us, and somehow my dad was asleep still, but my mum wakes him up. We say, there's something out there. It's got the gun. My dad quickly breaks out his shotgun, and all three of us head out now. Maybe it was like the tribe mentality, but I felt a lot more confident now, and so did my brother. And we actually start running towards where that we'd seen it. But we get there, and we can see the glow of my torch and my rifle. I say, yes, this is it. We had a look round everywhere, but can't see a thing. I then hesitantly and slowly start going further towards it. Then I'm able to pick up my rifle and just pan the torch around. But again, I can't see a thing. We ended up staying out there for probably another good hour or two, until eventually my dad says, alright boys, let's head back. Must have scared him off, whoever it was. And I say, but Dad, this wasn't a person, this was a thing. My brother goes, yeah, it wasn't. He says, come on, that's enough now, and let's head back. And that was the last I ever saw of it. Still don't know what it was, or if it was somebody out there messing with us. But it seems a bit far-fetched to me. I've never seen it since, but I'm always left wondering, am I going to encounter it again? And will I be alone like the other time? I hope not. In May 1985, my friend and I were returning to the United States after we had spent a week wandering and camping in Canada. We are both female. Being 20 years old, we had scarce any money, and we had just spent the last of it on gas, so we needed to make it home. We drove into the night late. By 1 AM we have a few more hours left. We were travelling south on Route 84 to Illinois. My friend was driving and we're having a great time. We chatted up a storm as we made our way down the little 2-lane highway. It's probably a scenic road by day, but at night everything is pitch black. Suddenly, a shape appeared at the very edge of our headlights. It looked like a log was laying on the opposite lane. As we get closer, the log turns out to be the legs of a man sitting on the highway. As we got even closer, we could see that the man was sitting on the solid white line of the opposite lane, legs just sitting there out on the highway like he's waiting for cars to come. We slowed down, swerving towards him. We said a few things like, I wonder if he needs help, why is he laying there? The headlights completely illuminate him as we drive towards him. He sat face down on the opposite side of the road, so we were looking at him in profile. He's wearing a brown suit, brown shoes and a brown hat. His arms hung down by his side. At first he didn't even acknowledge us or move in any way. We just stare at him in silence. Suddenly though, he jerked his face towards us. His eyes were glowing red, his mouth open and twisted in a snarl. We were completely terrified. I should mention that, to my friend's credit, she doesn't panic and actually swerves out of the way, reacting very quickly, punching the gas, making a getaway. As we've actually sped away, we both turn to have a look at the face out the back of the window, but we can't see too well in the darkness. But I couldn't shake the feeling of the wrongness, like we stumbled across something we weren't supposed to see. It looked like a person, but those eyes were glowing and not human. Now, today I'd like to share my story that happened quite a number of years ago, though the feelings have never really left me. I'm somebody who spent a lot of time working out in nature. I was a park ranger, so I'd always done things outside. I mean, not just while I was at work, but for other reasons too. I remembered I had some friends that were really begging me to go out to the desert with them. I had this best friend called John, and he was the one who was the most up for it. He kept on telling me about all of these crazy experiences that he had out in this particular area of the desert. He said that he would see these people, well, he kind of describes them as some kind of beings or something, and I don't know, it was linked to UFOs and things, and I'm actually sure that I saw a UFO once. I was on top of one of our towers that you use for lookouts, and I saw a light in the sky that almost appeared red then purple, then suddenly split off in 4 different directions with different sections of it going the different ways. So yeah, I was kind of up for this. I was a little skeptical. I mean, even though I'd seen a UFO, I didn't really trust my eyes, and being out there and being so bored at times, I guess your mind plays tricks on you. But this friend John kept on and on going on about it, and eventually I decided to agree. He said it was kind of like a spiritual place that you could go to, and pretty much you'd be able to talk through all of your problems with these beings and that everything would be okay. Now, don't ask me why I actually agreed to do this. I don't know, I guess I wasn't thinking at the time. I'm not someone who really gives into peer pressure too. He'd actually been going on about this for ages, and I don't know, I felt bad for always saying no, so we set out on one particular day. We parked up and made sure that we have all of our water with us, and we set off. Now, we had some camping gear with us, so we're going to be okay, as long as the water didn't run too low. We decided that we'd never go far from where we parked, so that way we can always go back and get more supplies if we really need them. So with that, off we went. Now, the first area that we're going in, you can see lots of different tyre tracks, and apparently, according to John, this wasn't good because it meant other people would be around, but he told me not to worry too much about this. The area that we're in is actually pretty nice. We're kind of flanked by hills, and there's kind of like a mountainy part up ahead of us. It looks really cool though, to be honest. And we continue on our hike. Now, John's actually a really good friend, and he's genuinely one of the only people that actually understands me and is very similar with me in life. We have had a few arguments, but just over silly things, and I guess this guy was more of a brother than my actual brother to me at times. Now, that meant we would talk about everything. Often it was about relationships and other things that had went wrong in our lives before, and the more we spoke, I guess the more that we realised we're similar. And again, I didn't actually know just how similar we were. I mean, heck, it was pretty unbelievable, but I won't share too many details here about that, just because it kind of goes into some of the darkness that we both seem to experience somehow at the same time, almost living opposite lives, but parallel emotionally. So we talk through everything, and he says that we're not too far from where we need to get to, and that's when we encounter the first group of people. Now, they do seem a little bit weird at first. John also seems a little bit hesitant, but he ends up going up to them and starts talking. It turns out that they're here for the same reason, and although they seem a little bit weird, we decide to try and talk to them. I wasn't sure if one of them was on something, but he just seemed too talkative. They tell us that they've got something they want us to drink, and apparently they made some nice bush tea for us. Who was I to say no, and I end up drinking it. We exchange a couple of snacks, and it was actually a really good time. Now, we'd been with these guys for quite a while, and eventually decide that it's time to leave them and go on. Now, we continue on our way, and you can actually see that the path is marked by different rocks that people have put there, so we know that we're not going anywhere too dangerous or anything. My friend John constantly reminds me to drink lots of water, and I keep doing so. I seem to get a headache now, which I really can't fend off for some reason. I have pretty sensitive eyes though. I can't even look at the ground when it's bright without sunglasses, without my eyes being strained. I also get this weird thing where I kind of see like flashy lights or something, but I know what it is. It's not a migraine, but I guess it's just my eyes going weird. Sometimes I'll see a strange bright colour too, but I guess that doesn't matter too much. We come up to one part of the hike where there's quite a big drop on the left hand side of us. If we're going to fall now, we're going to be in trouble, so we really try our best to avoid this. My friend then says that we haven't got too much further to go before we get to the people, and that's when we encounter some rangers. That's really odd, I think. There shouldn't be any rangers up here whatsoever. I don't know what they're doing, and we just say hi and don't really think much of it and just keep going. They seemed a little odd, but I wasn't paying too much attention. That's when my buddy John says, "Did you notice something?" I say, "No, what's that?" He says, "Well, those guys looked almost exactly the same as each other, and I don't know, something just felt really off about them." I didn't really notice it, but trying to think of it, it almost felt like they didn't have much of a facial expression, almost like they were wearing a rubber mask, but I can't really tell. They eventually go off a little bit further, and we don't think too much of it as they slowly go out of sight. I then explain that I've heard about some twins who become park rangers in an area not far from where I was working at the time, and that, yeah, it's just basically a normal thing that you will get stuff like this. You know, you get families who are raised in the outdoors like me, and that's what the families want to do, jobs like ours. And my buddy John tells me not to worry too much and makes a joke out of it. And I tell him, "Hey, I'm not the one worried here," and we press on. Now, my friend keeps on talking to me about this thing and how great it's going to be, and eventually we set up the tents. We do this, and I keep on slamming my water. One thing that's weird is that I haven't really had the urge to urinate too much yet. Usually I'll be going like every 10 seconds almost, but I don't really feel the urge to. I guess it was hot, but the weird thing is it's not really too hot now. There's kind of an overcast in the clouds, and it means that it's not really warm, it's actually a little bit cold. But John says, "Hey, come on man, we've got to go up to this before sundown, because this hill is where you're going to see it." Now, I was either convinced that he was just off his head, or there were actually aliens here. We're nowhere near Roswell, so it wasn't anything like that. But I don't know, I've given him the benefit of the doubt. Talking to this friend though was honestly like a therapy in itself. It was almost like the ideas that I had, my friend could give me, and the ideas that he had, he could give me, and it would kind of complete each other. Not in a weird way, but just kind of like a nice bond and friendship. So yeah, it's getting a little bit dark, and I keep telling my buddy that we have to remember where the tent is because we're not going to see it. My friend doesn't take much notice of me and keeps on going. Now, he says that he's going to continue on, but I say that I feel like I need to stop for a bit. I don't know why, but suddenly the headache becomes absolutely overwhelming. Now, my friend continues on and I just let him go. Now, I feel extremely tired suddenly and I don't want to sleep, but you know when you try and lay on your side and not sleep, you know what happens? Yeah, you end up sleeping. Now, that was exactly what happened to me. I managed to wake myself up a couple of times, but I kind of drift off again. It's almost like I've got an alarm clock in my head, but I permanently had it on snooze and I wake up again. When I woke up, I felt like I'd slept for ages and almost like I'd had the best night's sleep of my life, but everything felt different now. I get up and look at the sky, and it's kind of got like an orange hue to it, and I continue on the trail and try and find where my friend is. For some reason when I wake up, I suddenly feel much more peaceful. I wasn't concerned about finding my friend, and I presumed that he just left me there to sleep and went back to the tent, so I decided to go on myself. I drank quite a lot of water again, and I was actually running out in my first tank, which is surprising. Again, no urge to urinate, which I think is really weird, but I keep going. Now, as I'm walking, I can hear a strange humming. It was almost like a kind of energy is the best way I can describe it. I wasn't entirely sure what it was, but I knew I should keep going, and I thought maybe, just maybe, this is what John was telling me about. And I thought in the back of my head, maybe this is him up here making those sounds. I decide to continue, and I make it a bit further now. The going's actually quite tough here, and the terrain's quite rocky now. I'm not too happy about this because I keep on whacking my shins when I'm trying to go up this thing. And also I keep getting little branches and things that are cutting up my ankles. But for some reason I'm not too bothered by this, and that's weird too, because usually I'm really worried. as I get higher and higher up, I realise something weird now. I seem to be talking to myself in my head kind of far too much. It's quite weird. It goes from very positive to suddenly very negative, and it keeps on switching between the two. And that's when I realise it. Something's different about the sky. The colours seem off, and the sky just seems far too bright. Now, I think this is really bizarre, but nothing too much to worry about. Again, I wasn't really thinking straight at this time. Now, I end up just walking and walking, and I don't necessarily have a destination in mind. I don't know how far I was gone for, but I see my buddy up ahead of me. At least I think it's John. I say, John, John, and he keeps on walking around the corner. I think, God, you're such an idiot. My foot was starting to hurt now, and I can't be bothered to walk quicker, but I practically force myself to power up towards him. I eventually make it there, and I realise something strange. He's just vanished. I try and figure out where that he's actually gone to, and I walk up the hill and look over it, and there he is again. John! John, I scream out, but he doesn't listen. What's weird is that he just keeps on and on walking, but he seems to be far too far away from me. Even if he sprinted down this hill, he shouldn't have been able to get this far, and I suddenly realise that I can't see him any longer. I think this is odd, and I look around, and suddenly I've realised that there's a few more people around. There's quite a lot up on a ridge, and they're all waving at me, trying to get me to come over to them. I can see that they brought some kind of dirt bike with them, and I put my hand on it, but I decide to leave it because it's theirs. I think that this is a group that we've seen earlier, so I start to go further and further. And my God, do I have a bad migraine or something, because my eyes are going a bit funny. I'm kind of seeing the weird colours again, but my vision's definitely a bit off now. I try not to think too much of it, and I reach down and realise that there's all water over my hand. I quickly start slapping around trying to figure out where the source of it's from, and notice how cold my hand is, when I realise that suddenly my hand isn't wet and it's in my head. I'm not aware that something's off at this point, and I just thought it was lucky that there's no water here. I then open up my bag and start drinking, and I realise that the heavens have opened up now. There's rain falling all around me, and it feels quite nice to be out of the desert sun. Now, I eventually make it up to the hill where all the people are waving, and it seems like they're being very friendly to me, saying good things and encouraging me. I stop to get a bit of breath and rest my legs for a few moments, and I say, hey guys, wait for me, I won't be long. And that's when I realise that my vision's gone a bit weird. It almost feels like I'm going backwards now, but I'm not. I take a few deep breaths and I become very, very conscious of my breathing and the rain around me. This calms me a lot, and I think the deep breathing did me some good. And I'll continue on and make sure that I can see my new friends at the top of the hill. There seems to be less and less of them now, and I eventually make it all the way up there. Now when I get to the very top, suddenly something changes. It's almost like they've all just appeared around me suddenly, but as I look at them, their faces seem off, and I suddenly notice that there's something very inhuman about them. Now, their faces look much more scary, and suddenly they morph into some kind of dark figures which tower over me. I mean, it starts off with about my height until they're about 2 or 3 times taller, and suddenly they surround me. But for whatever reason, I don't feel afraid and I don't feel scared of anything. I kind of notice that they're around me, and because I can't see now, I kind of lose my balance and fall over for a second. When I fall over, I'm staring back up at the sky now. I don't feel any pain or anything, but I can see lightning bolts all around me, and the rain picks up a lot more. I wiped my eyes trying to figure out what was happening when I eventually managed to get myself up off the ground again. I'm looking around and the figures are gone. I think, my God, did I encounter them? Was that it? What did I get out of this? Did I learn anything? Did I see anything? Are they actually there? And I think that this can't necessarily be anything that I actually believe's there. And I decide that I should keep looking for John. It suddenly clicks again. Now, that's when I start to get a bit scared. I have a sudden feeling of panic, and the more that I panic, the worse I feel, and I start picking up the pace more and more. And I start to see these beings again. These are different from the ones that I've seen earlier, and they seem a lot more malicious and malevolent. The further I go, the closer they seem to come towards me. It gets to a point where I honestly feel like there's an army of them behind me, and I don't dare look around. I'm not sure how long this went on for with this weird feeling of being followed, but my god, it must have been a long time. And I can tell you that I did not feel good during 1 second of it. I was trying to loop my way back round to where the tent should be, but to be honest I had no idea of where I was going. Now, as you can imagine, this is incredibly dangerous out in the desert, especially if you're on your own, but I wasn't thinking of that. I remember eventually I was able to stop and turn around, and they're gone again. I look up in the sky for UFOs, and the stars seem to be too bright, and there seems to be too many of them. I wipe my eyes and it's rain again. I realise something's definitely off now. I start trying to hit my head, not hard, just enough to make sure I'm awake, but yes I am. Now suddenly things seem to go straight back to normal. The raining stopped now, which I'm pretty happy about, and I continue now, but I'm no longer on the path. I'm going towards some kind of darker area now, where the sun seems to be far from me. I get here and I feel like I'm on a barren wasteland, and I call out for John. All I'm met with is echoes, and I'm convinced that he's back in the tent. I say, John, you better be in that tent and I better find you there. And I start trying to go downhill now, and that's when I fall. I don't know how it happened, but I can only imagine that my foot got snagged on a rock, and I actually fall quite a bit down, tumbling. I fall asleep again, and now I wake up and John is prodding me. At least I think it's John. I say, John, what are you doing? Confused as to who it is. And that's when I see it. One of the dark beings has found me, and there's a sea of stars behind him, and he takes me by my hand and lifts me up. Now, as he's lifting me up, I realise that I'm in some kind of different area again to where I thought I was. For some reason, this being seems a lot more friendly than the others, and seems to be guiding me away from wherever I was before. I look back and I can see the army of the others once again, and this thing just demands without saying anything that I look forward, and that's exactly what I do. Now, I keep going down pretty treacherous terrain, but this thing seems to be really helping me get through. Now, as weird as it sounds, I was pretty much having a full-on conversation with this thing in my head. It spoke in almost like a hushed tone, but kind of with more reverberation. It was like every time that it spoke, I would hear things and feel it through my body. I was asking where we were going and it said to safety, and I kept asking what's happening and it kept saying don't worry, don't worry. Now I'm not sure when it happened, but this being, whatever it is, left me, and it was up to me to continue the rest of the journey. I look around and it's much further away now, pointing, trying to usher me to go forwards, and I follow it. I'm now walking pretty close to some kind of crevasse or something. Almost like a very, very small Grand Canyon's probably the best way that I can describe it, but maybe not grand because of how small it is. Again, I'm going on a pretty sheer rock face, and how I don't fall at this point is beyond me. I know that my fall was definitely real though because of the blood on my white socks. Now, it doesn't take too much longer, and a miracle happens. I can see the tent, and it's where it should be, and I can see the silhouette of something or someone in it. Is it my friend? What is it? I think to myself. Now, I'm pretty much glued to the spot, and I realise that I've been asking myself this over and over again in my head for God knows how long, until eventually I decide that I've got to will myself forward, and it's almost like I've got to will one foot ahead of the other. I eventually make it there and open the tent, and John's there. I say, "John, what are you doing?" He says, "Hi, you're back. I was getting worried about you." I say, "What do you mean?" He said, "I thought you said you were going to come back soon and we're going to take a leak." I say, "I didn't say that. You were just going up the hill." And he looks at me very confused. I then tell him about the beings, and he tells me that he saw some too, but he wasn't sure what to think of it, because he was quite tired and thought it was a dream. He then tells me that he thinks what he saw was me, and called out but I didn't reply, so he told me to meet me back at the tent, and he fell asleep. I decided not to tell him exactly what I'd seen, and I ended up crashing out. Now I woke up again the next morning, and my God did I feel terrible. My body felt like absolute crud, and I decided the best thing to do is slam lots of water. I feel a lot better, and suddenly my heart starts pounding. Suddenly, all of my senses come flooding back to me, and the fear, this terrible fear of realizing what had happened the night before, comes back to me. I let out a loud gasp and grab my friend John, who is still sleeping. I shake him awake, and it looks like he's just seen a ghost because of the way that I've awoken him. I then explain everything that happened to him, and that's when it hits us. Something was definitely off last night. I explain my story, and he then tells me his, and we weirdly both describe the beings as being almost exactly the same as each other, and we have this horrible feeling of dread, like something's really off. My friend John now realizes that he definitely didn't understand what actually happened to me, and that it's weird because we have different stories of how we lost each other. We decide that we need to go back and make sure that we stay nice and hydrated because we're going to move quick, and we quickly pack up the things. Now, I can't describe to you the feeling of dread that I had when I packed up everything and I start heading back with John. I was absolutely convinced that it was paramount that we were about to be followed by those beings. Now, I have to tell you, in this moment, it was so real. What I'd seen and experienced is truly like nothing else that I've ever seen on Earth before. And I don't know, in the moment I was kind of in this trance, so I just guess I went along with it. I remembered every time that I'd see a bush or tree that was darker than the rest, I almost had a mini heart attack. But I kept going. I didn't have a choice. The weird thing is too that the landscape all looked different from the way we'd come in. Luckily though, John knew the way, and eventually we make it back to the rocks which had been put there by others to mark the way. Now neither of us say anything. We're both very, very, very paranoid and constantly looking around, trying to see if there's anything there, or any kind of explanation for what we'd just seen. We start talking a bit, and that's the more scared we get, the more we try and match up what had happened. Now, eventually we do make it back, and my God, getting back to being inside a vehicle was probably the best feeling in the world. I was actually so shaken up that I couldn't drive though, and I just had to lock the doors and just lay in the seat for a while, trying to think of what had happened. Had we been drugged? My buddy John then says that he thinks that we were probably drugged, and that those guys probably spiked us with something that we ate or drank. He said it sounded like a weird drug that he had heard about before that can make you hallucinate, and apparently the plant for it and seeds are actually quite common in nature, and he thinks they probably got it from here and thought it'd be funny to do it and not tell us. I was convinced of the same thing because the whole thing just felt so weird. God, how could they be so evil to us? I mean, we literally could have died. We could have ended up like those hikers who went out into the wilderness and just disappeared. What really worried me is the fact that we got separated out here, completely out of our minds, both of us. Now, anything could have happened to me. I checked for bruises and I didn't have a headache or anything, but I could have easily hit my head and got brain bleeding or something. I don't know, it's just too easy to happen out here. But the thing that neither of us understand is, how do we get back? We both agree that we're probably miles away from each other at some point, because at the very least, we should have heard each other screaming out, but we didn't hear a thing. And the rest of the drive back was a pretty weird one. This is when the both of us discovered that we had also seen the rain before, but the area around us didn't seem to be too wet. I mean, yeah, it is a desert, so it could have just evaporated, but I don't know. It just felt a little bit different somehow. And eventually we get back. Now we make it to John's mum's house, and John's mum says, "God, you guys must have seen it. Surely you guys seen it. Tell me you did. It was right where you guys were staying." We look at each other very concerned. Was this the first that the beings had been actually reported or what? And his mum then says, "Did you see the UFO? I saw it. So many of our neighbours saw it." I say, "What do you mean?" Getting a little bit angry. She says, "The UFO. So many of us saw it. Those weird flashing lights in the sky. It was almost like a big triangle with red glowing orbs under it. It went over to roughly where you guys were staying in the desert. Then a few more appeared, and it was there in the same place for about a good half an hour." My heart drops now. Apparently it was accompanied by a quick storm, and suddenly they just shot off, never to be seen again that night. Apparently hundreds of people had all seen the same thing, and the timeline pretty much matched up to when we got over there. Now, me and John looked at each other, and we went off into his room and sat down for a while. We made some tea, and just kind of stared at each other, not knowing what to say. Now, it's been quite a while since this experience, and I don't know, I could have very easily been drugged with my friend, but the fact that a lot of what we had seen matched up with each other, and the other fact that so many people had seen something in the sky that night exactly where we are, it just seems a little bit weird. It just doesn't feel right. I don't know. One of the main responsibilities I had working in my national park is to make sure that I survey the climate testing devices. I'm not in the United States of America too, so it might be different out there, but we really put a lot of emphasis onto checking the air quality and trying to maintain it. We try and keep it to the highest possible standard that we can, and it's not really easy, but we have lots of trees, which is really a good thing. Now, on this particular day, I set out to check the first 3 posts, and they were fine. I go into the 4th and final one, and it's starting to get dark. I can then see that there's a colleague who's already there, so I don't think much of it. I just continue doing my job and do a friendly wave, but I don't get one back. I turn around and go to do my other task, hoping that this person has done it for me, expecting them to catch up with me. I then realise that they look odd. Something about the way that they're standing hunched over just doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't look like somebody who's happy and healthy. It looks like somebody who's a little bit off. I don't know, just their whole demeanour seems really strange to me. I then shine my flashlight over, thinking maybe they're in trouble, and I get the fright of my life. I'm met with something that is wearing an all dark robe, has a very weird goat kind of face, and looks like what I can only describe as the devil, with completely black eyes. It's probably about 7 feet tall, and slowly turns to face me. I drop the flashlight, and within a moment, I'm bolting the opposite direction. Eventually I make it back to the station, and I frantically explain what's happened, and some of the other guys go to check it out. We can't find anything, just my flashlight and its dying light now, because it's been out there in the cold for a while. We don't find a person or devil, but we do find something weird. There are hoof marks in the ground, exactly where I saw this thing. Weirdly, there's none leading away, just perfectly in the position that I saw this thing standing there. We never saw this thing again, but it actually is in our folklore to have things like this around, so I'm certain what I saw was probably the devil or some kind of demonic entity.